Hello, good morning, everybody. Like Chris said, my name is EK, but the truth is my name's not actually EK. It's a lot more complicated than that. My name is Ikechukwu, which means God's power. Ike means power, Chukwu means God. But I go by Ike because in Nigeria, the Igbo language is very tonal. So if you say Ike, it means power, but if you say Ike, it means you're behind. So the tone makes the huge difference. So usually the English language, it's hard to pronounce the tones. When I tell people my real name, they pronounce it the wrong way. So I'll be answering to somebody saying the word behind, and I'll be like turning my head. So EK is a lot more simpler than that. But I kind of wanted to go through and kind of talk about who I am, my seminary formation, what led me to the seminary, and then in seminary, how that's been, and I guess my time here at the parish. So starting off, like Chris mentioned, I am Nigerian. My parents were born in Nigeria. They were born actually in the village in Nigeria. So this was kind of like the transition period between the village start turning more urban and more townsy. So they experienced farming, going to the pond early in the morning, fetching water, bringing it back to the village. But they've also experienced like college and, the more urban, modernized life. So they experienced both parts of that. First was my dad that came to the US, but then later it was my mom that followed, and they lived in New Jersey. And then that's when they started working as nurses. And that's when my older sister, myself, and my younger brother were born in New Jersey, actually. We lived there 3 years, and the story is we lived in a bad neighborhood in New Jersey because my parents, this is the first time coming to the States, so they weren't living in like a safe neighborhood. So the story was that the neighborhood was very dangerous, but despite that, my parents wanted to make sure that we were raised right. So my older sister, they took her to like a private Catholic pre-K school, and she came back cursing. So, yeah. Yeah. So then at that point, my dad said, yeah, no, we're not staying here. If the Catholic schools, they're coming back cursing at pre-K, then we're not staying here. So at that point, they made every effort to move to Dallas and make sure they got a good neighborhood in Dallas. So that's how I ended up being raised in Wiley, Texas. So schooling-wise, I was public schooled my whole life, which has its benefits, but also has its drawbacks. The benefits is I got to really experience the world as it is, like the craziness of everything. But then the drawbacks was, I guess I didn't get to experience deep, rich formation in the Catholic faith. Although my parents were Catholic and they did teach us the Catholic faith, there's something to learning about Catholicism in school, or I guess day after day, week after week. So that was something that I guess I missed out on. But I'd say this kind of leads into my vocation story. What led me to seminary was second grade. We had a field day at the school, and I remember I was starting to feel ill during the field day. And so I told my teacher. The teacher sent me to the school nurse. The school nurse took my temperature, said, oh, you have a fever. Called my dad. My dad took me home. Fever persisted. My dad took me to the doctor. And the doctor said, oh, strep throat. Here's this medication. Give this to him and he'll be okay. Everyone has had strep throat, or strep throat is pretty common. So when they gave me the medication, I got worse. And I woke up in the morning. And at that time, my mom was actually giving birth to my youngest sister. So she was at the hospital giving birth, and my dad actually went with her after, because my grandma was with us. So my dad went with her for that. And the following morning, after I got the medication, I remember I was feeling terrible. There's like the couch that we had. There was like a single-seater couch that I'd always curl up in whenever I was sick. So then I was curling up in that couch. So they knew, okay, he's not feeling well. But then my grandma was like, what's going on? And I was explaining to her I'm not feeling well. And then at that point, my lip started peeling. And then my grandma was like, what is going on? she calls my dad because she was asking my dad's mom, and then she's like, "Look what's happening to your son. What's going on?" My dad said, "I'm on my way." My dad took me, drove back, took me back to the doctor. The doctor said, "Oh, he's having an allergic reaction," and then from there calls the ambulance. I'm rushed to the ER of Children's Hospital here in Dallas. But then when I was sent to the hospital, I was in the waiting room for about 8 hours because they did not, so they did not see me, and they just gave me a coloring. I remember they gave me like a coloring book, and like I was coloring, but I was coloring for a little bit, but I felt bad. It was hard to color, and I don't remember what led them to admitting me. I remember my dad did go back to the desk and say, "Hey, we've been here for this and this long. What's going on?" But they had other people, I guess, because I remember it was packed. The place was packed, so I guess they had other children that they looked more dire situation. Because I guess besides my lip being peeled, I looked fine. Maybe it looked like I had a fever. But eventually, I did get admitted to the hospital, and I remember I still have this image of being admitted to the hospital in this room with like glass everywhere. And then I remember the doctors doing tests and stuff. They didn't know what to do with me, didn't know what was going on. Just put ice packs under my armpits and then like tucked me into the bed. And then I think my dad had left because he didn't have any clothes or anything. My mom's in the hospital. So my dad left that night to go grab some stuff and go back. And I remember being the only person in that room. They turned off the lights. It was dark. They closed the doors, and it was just kind of like nothing. Yeah, and then I remember going to sleep. And that was like my first image of, I guess, being hospitalized there. But then situations started getting worse and worse. Started giving me more medication, more trying to treat the symptoms. They still didn't know what's going on. And then at this point, they're like, they asked me, "How are you feeling? How are you feeling?" And I'm telling them, my insides are burning. So my dad at this point, he gets really worried. My skin at this point starts to peel over my body. And then my dad calls my aunt who lives in Fort Worth and Keller, Texas. And my dad explains everything. He's like, "I don't know what's happening to my son. Please help me. What's going on?" And then when my dad explains everything to my aunt says, "I know what this is." Because even the medical team didn't know what it was. Because my aunt, before living in Fort Worth, she lived in Indiana, and my aunt's a nurse. She said she had a patient that was going through the same thing. Nobody knew what happened, and then the patient died. So my aunt, she was at work at that time. She left work and then came to the hospital and was trying to tell the medical staff, this and this is exactly what's going on. Listen to it, but they don't want to, pay attention to her. So then she was kind of like, in the hospital, they'd call this type of family a second person, like I don't know the exact term for it, like complicated family relations, something like that, because it's like somebody who's constantly, you want to say harassing the staff, but she was just like kind of, but my aunt was very like persistent, like, "Here's what's going to happen. You see this child is hyperventilating right now, and you don't want to put him on oxygen. If his lung collapses, I will sue you." And then they didn't want to put me on oxygen because they said, once we put him on oxygen, it's going to prolong his stay in the hospital. That was their argument. So it was a whole kind of fiasco. But it wasn't to the point, it wasn't until my aunt finally said, "Listen, if this child dies on my watch, first I will sue you, but then I'm going to call the news agency, bring them here to show them exactly what happened." And once they heard that, all hands on deck. So then they started actually treating me, listening to my aunt, and then doing the research, prying into what my aunt said. And I remember at this point, like, insides burning, all my skin's peeled off, bleeding, ooze, everything coming out. And I remember my aunt I remember the exact story. My aunt told them, "Okay, put him in an induced coma because we don't want him overworking himself. We don't want his organs to fail." And then they were like, "No, we don't want to put him in an induced coma, yada, yada," arguing back and forth. And then I believe my aunt went to me and said, "Hey, do you want to be in an induced coma? How do you feel? Do you want to be in an induced coma?" I couldn't speak. I gave him a thumbs up. And then Yeah, and then the doctor said, "Well, you heard the man, or you heard the boy," and then induced coma, and that's kind of where my memory kind of fades of the hospitalization. But I remember bits and pieces of it, but trying to remember important aspects of it. Um, I was hospitalized in general for about a month and a half. I was in the ICU on life support, I think, for about 3 weeks, and I remember it got to a point where the medical team, the medical staff, after trying everything, my situation getting dire, I think my temperature was like consistent, like was at 104 or something like that. And I believe I even coded. I know I coded at least once, but it got to a point where the medical team said, "Okay, we've tried everything, and yeah, there's no more hope. There's no more medical interventions we can do. Your son is most likely going to pass. And if somehow miraculously he survives, he'll come out of the situation. He'll be blind, he'll be deaf, and he'll be on a breathing tube the rest of his life." And my parents, they did not accept that. They didn't want to take that. They said no. They got the church involved, the Catholic Church involved, the St. Joseph in Richardson. They got Nigerian community involved, all of them praying. And I came out of that situation alive, also with my sight, hearing, and breathing, and no explanation to it. Doctors couldn't explain it. And even also, I forgot to mention this, when I was at Children's and my case got so severe, they actually moved me to Parkland Hospital. They transferred me, and they started treating me as an adult burns victim rather than as a child, because my case was so severe. And once I survived and made it and started getting better in Parkland Hospital, the doctor who was, I guess, the primary physician, not primary physician, what's the term? Attending, thank you, the attending, yes. The attending doctor that was treating me at Children's actually went over to Parkland because he didn't believe it, because he wanted to see for his own eyes that I survived. So that's how dire the situation was. But it was this experience, coming out of this experience, that kind of put within, like, the deepest part of me was, okay, God is real. God exists no matter what. I knew God was real. And then at this point, kind of made the decision, okay, I want to be a doctor. I want to go through the medical path. So throughout public school, that's kind of what my idea was the medical path. I'll fast forward through public school a little bit. Trying to hit the high points. High school, around 9th grade, began serving Mass. Or as more, my dad didn't force me or force my siblings to serve Mass, but it was highly suggested, if that makes sense. Because my dad was an altar server in Nigeria, and he said for like 17 years, so it was for a long time he was an altar server. And then so he said that he wants us, because we'd come back from Mass, and then he'd be like, okay, name the parts of the Mass. And then we'd be like, the priest preaches at one point. So he was like, yeah, you all are serving Mass. So, and it was honestly serving Mass that really started getting me more familiar with the parts of the Mass, the order of the Mass. And also, I think it started making me think a lot more of the priesthood. But even before serving Mass there, throughout, I guess, elementary school, middle school, high school, during Mass, when it came to the homily, I wouldn't pay attention to the priest, which was, I've maybe mentioned this to some people before. The priest would come out doing the homily, he'll say a couple words, I'll listen to him, and then I'll zone him out, and then start making my own homily. So I start formulating homilies in my head, and then imagining myself on the altar, preaching it to the congregation around me. And I thought this was normal. I thought everybody did this. Yeah, I genuinely thought everybody did this. And this zoning out maybe, but it wasn't until I actually entered seminary that I realized how weird it was. So even like when I was in college, I'll get to that part later, but even in college when I was doing this, I thought everybody did this. But yeah, and I'd zone the priest out, make my own homilies, and imagine myself preaching it to the crowd. There was something else in there too that I forgot I was going to say, but I can't remember exactly. what it was there, but it was, I guess, in high school serving Mass that was a lot more persistent of the thought of priesthood, but it would come maybe like once a month, once every 3 months. And I'd see the priest like, oh, maybe I can do this. But then I'd think, oh, but my friend, this is how I was public school. So it's like nobody there, even if they were Catholic, it was nominally Catholic. So if I was to come out and say, oh, I'm thinking about the priesthood, I would be like ridiculed. And because I was on the basketball team varsity. So it's like, I was in the span of like National Honor Society kind of thing. So I'd be with the top 10% and all that stuff. But at the same time, I played basketball, so I was friends with people who were, some of them in and out of jail. So I could like, I was in the middle of both worlds. I can interact with both worlds. So that was, I think, a blessing, because even now, I'm like in seminary, it's doing homeless ministry. I know how to interact with people who maybe have been in jail to come out, and I just kind of know how to interact with them. But so go throughout public school, high school, priesthood, the thought come in and out. But I remember a specific time, this might have been like 10th grade or 9th grade, that there was a seminarian that came into the parish, and this seminarian, I think he served Mass, and then the priest at the time, he was like, hey, after Mass, we're going to have pizza. Seminarian's going to be there. He's going to share his story about the priesthood, think about vocations. And I didn't care for any of that. And then we get into the car driving home. My mom's like, so who talk to me and my brother. She's like, which one of y'all are going to the event after Mass? I said, it was silence. It's pure silence. So any of y'all going for just to hear about the priesthood? Any of y'all thought about the priesthood? And we're just like, no, we don't want anything to do with it. We're going to get married. We're going to be doctors, whatever, naming out stuff. And my mom, she was like, y'all are going. So there's like no argument. If anything, just go there, eat the pizza. And I remember going there, hearing this seminarian talk, and I'll be honest, this was probably bad, but as the seminarian was talking, I was eating pizza, I was like, this is lame. This guy's lame. I don't want to do anything like this. And God, he has a sense of humor, because here I am talking about vocations. But I remember, but then even though that was lame, driving back, the thought of the priesthood came back. So it made it more persistent, even though I was pushing it away. And then I entered college. I graduated high school, into college. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas. And I was actually studying pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor. So first year of medicine, or first year of pre-med, finished that. But the second year of medicine is really when I started feeling like I was wasting my time. And there wasn't really joy in what I was doing. Kind of felt like I was doing it because I needed to do this, because this is what I had to do to get a good GPA, just score well on the MCAT, get into a good medical school, and then be a surgeon. My goal was, I had a plan, and I was like, I'm going to be a surgeon, if not orthopedic surgeon, if not that, I'm going to be an orthopedic specialist, if not that, a general practitioner, if not that, a chiropractor. That's kind of how I had that laid out. But really in college, the second year of college, when I started feeling, okay, I can't see myself doing this. This isn't. And then I started getting thoughts of, I'm going to be a priest anyway, so what's the point about any of this? And then the weirdest thing was, even as I thought I was going to be a surgeon or a doctor, I always thought, but I'll have a Catholic ministry on the side. That's kind of what it was. Not knowing that this was me still pushing away the idea of vocation, but still trying to keep aspects of it according to how I wanted to do things. But it wasn't until I was like, no. And then I remember there's a point when I was sitting at home, I flipped open the Bible just randomly, and it was, I believe it was 1 Timothy 4, I can't remember the exact passage, or 2 Timothy 4, and this was at a point in time, actually, I was working out a lot too. This is like a point in college I started working out, because I remember I was in my first year of college, my friend took a picture of me without me knowing, and he showed it to me, and I saw my arms, it was pretty skinny. I was like, oh, that's me? So then I was like, I'm gonna start hitting the weights. So I had a regiment, and then me and my friends were just hitting the weights. So then this plays into it. But I open up the passage to scriptures, and it says, it was along the lines of like, preach the word, do not fail in preaching the word and sharing the gospel. Do all these things, and you'll be a good servant of the Lord. This is Paul talking to Timothy. Do all these things, you'll be a good servant of the Lord. Don't let anybody look down upon you because of your age. And then it says, devote yourself to the things of the Lord. Physical training is of some value, but devote yourself to godly training because it will be beneficial to you and to those like who you encounter. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but I read this and it was like a speaking directly to me, because it was the fear of joining seminary or being a priest because of what other people were saying. It was like, don't let anyone look down upon your age. This was a time where I was hitting the weight rooms. It's like, physical training is of some value, but devote yourself to godly training. And this was just speaking right to me. And at that point, I was like, all right, priesthood. I told my parents at that moment, Mom, Dad, I think God's calling me to be a priest. And then they said, well, okay, let's slow down. Because this is the first time I really brought that up to them. So, okay, that's good. So let's slow down. This is kind of coming out of nowhere. This thing takes time, thought, and discernment. Let's give it some time, and we'll come back to it. Then a week later, this is just pressing me. I was like, I think God's calling me to be a priest. And then they said, okay, you know what? Let's call your uncle. My uncle is a priest in the Diocese of Austin, Texas. He's at a parish in Waco. So I call him, and then he talks to me about it, and he says, yeah, should have a vocation director, call him and get the process started. So then I believe I call, nothing happens, but then there was the website that was kind of like, put your name and who you are here, send that in, and somebody get back to you. So I put my name in there and stuff, but I didn't really expect, I don't know what I expected, because the website, when I did it, I was like, is somebody really going to read this? So I put all the information in, hit send, and like the next day I get a call from Veronica. If any of y'all know Veronica Biglin, or Bigden, Big Lynn? Veronica, yeah. But she was, until like a few months ago maybe, I guess the secretary for the Office of Vocations. So was the secretary, is that the right term for?
Yeah.
Essentially, but secretary or executive director or something like that. So she calls me up and said, hey, EK, I got the message. I'm glad that you're thinking about this. I want to set you up with a meeting with Father Edwin Leonard, and we go from there. So I set up the meeting with Father Edwin. I remember that meeting. Me and my dad, we pull up to the chancellery. We go into the office to see Veronica. Veronica says, sit here, and Father Edwin will be with you shortly. 5 minutes later, she says, oh, here he is. And then I turn my head, there's like a long hallway, and I see Father Edwin all the way in the back. And I see this like 6'2", 6'3", jacked, muscular guy. And I was like, my first thought, I was like, is this allowed? It's like, is our priest allowed to be like swole and like tall like this? But then I had the meeting with him. Then he asked me, so when are you thinking about joining seminary? And I say, I think this fall. And this was maybe around like March that I was talking with him. So this was like urgent. If I was going to enter seminary, I had to get all the application stuff done like pretty fast. So I said, I don't see myself going back to college. Just studying this thing will be a waste of time, because that's really how I felt. So we start the seminary process, and then that fall, August, I enter seminary, and that kind of starts the whole seminary process. And I will say seminary in general has been a blessing. I guess I can invite questions after, but like certain highlights or certain things that I really, I guess, stood out to me in my first year of seminary. Are you familiar with the propedeutic stage? Ever heard about that? So there's a new propedeutic stage. It's like a year before you actually enter seminary, and that's more like a primer year to get you adjusted to prayer and the seminary life. So I did 2 years of college. So when I entered seminary, I should have entered as a junior if it was kind of going the right way. But they said seminary is not just about learning; it's about forming yourself as a human person. So they said, instead of moving me or coming in as a junior, I'm going to come in as a sophomore. So I was kind of mad that I felt like, oh man, I wasted a year of my life. But I look back and I'm really glad that I did that, because that really started it. That year brought me into the Catholic imagination of the Catholic world, and it really just kind of prepared me for seminary. So I was glad for that, even though I was already in seminary, but I considered that my propedeutic year. So I was glad for that. The first year, studying at UD, University of Dallas, I knew how to study to get the good grades, stuff like that. But studying at the University of Dallas that first year, I'll say I didn't really know what was going on. Like, I knew the materials, or it's just, I guess what it was is like I didn't understand why I was studying philosophy. That was kind of the thing. It's kind of, my idea was like, you need to learn the Bible, learn theology, and this is it. I didn't understand why I was studying philosophy. So although I was studying it, I was like, why am I learning about Plato? Well, how is he important to things? It wasn't until really maybe more my junior year, and especially my senior year, I started falling in love with philosophy, because it started changing the way that I review and approach the world. I hear people say things and I start thinking, okay, this person's coming from this philosophical field. I'd see things happening in the world and I said, okay, and now I see, almost you see the undergirdings of so many people's thoughts, or the thoughts of the world and actions, that before you just see it blindly, but now you see it and you see the motives behind it, or you see the beliefs behind it. And then that's one thing that I really loved about University of Dallas, about studying philosophy. Another thing that really stood out to me, and this still stands out to me now, was it made me realize how self-centered I was before seminary, because I constantly think about myself and my own struggles. But it wasn't until I entered seminary I began to see the sufferings of others, and that's what really stood out to me, is like other people are suffering. And what really made that stick out to me the most was my first year of seminary, spring semester around February, we all got sent home because of COVID. And so we got sent home, and then we had to do online classes at the University of Dallas. And after that semester, that summer assignments got canceled. So usually we got sent to parish or something like that. But I didn't get sent to nobody got sent to any parishes at first because of COVID. So then what Father Zach Webb, there was like he's called St. Raphael's Retreat Center, if you're familiar with it. But it has like individual houses there. So we stayed the summer. He called a majority of the Dallas Seminarians. We stayed the summer there. We did homeless ministry. And this is during COVID, and this is during the George Floyd riots. So we were going through downtown Dallas doing homeless ministry. And then also we did work at the seminary. We did like maintenance work at the seminary. So I think this might have been, no, this was later. But so yeah, we did maintenance work at the seminary. And doing homeless ministry, that's a blessing, because the first thing it did is it taught me how to talk to strangers, not to be afraid to talk to strangers, to go up to somebody on the street, how are you? It really humanized the person in front of me. Especially, there was a time where me and two other seminarians were in a group together, made friends with one of the homeless people, I guess a group of homeless people. We'd see them regularly. And one day, one of them wasn't there. We asked them, hey, what happened to him? They said, oh, last night he went to 7-Eleven, he got stabbed. Now he's in the hospital. And then he later died. But then seeing somebody, a homeless person who we were actually friends with, and then that person dying, and then it kind of, I told Father Webb about this, and he said, now you see the humanity of these people. Sometimes you watch the news and say, a homeless person stabbed to death at something park, and you kind of go through that while you're watching the news. But this one, now it's like, I know this person. This is a person. This is a human. So it was really seeing the sufferings of people who are homeless, but then also doing ministry in the, I guess, non-homeless world, if you want to say, I guess the world of people who aren't homeless, and then hearing their stories, hearing their sufferings, and realizing everyone's the same suffering that these homeless people are going through, the same sufferings that people who aren't homeless are going through. It's just some people are better at hiding it. So then that's kind of just one of the biggest takeaways from seminary that still affects me now, is whenever I meet someone new and I encounter them for the first time, I know this person's like a good person, or this is a nice, pleasant person, but my mind immediately goes to, this person's also a sufferer. This person also has his own suffering, struggles that they're going through, and this person may present themselves as, they have everything together, and some people are really good at doing that. But then it made me realize, but I know that's a lie. I know that's like a facade, because everyone has their own sufferings. So then it's kind of like, what suffering is this person going through? This person's in front of me is still human. And so this helps me now when it comes to evangelization. When I was at Notre Dame Seminary, there was a time they made us go and do ministry. Instead of homeless people, you're talking with regular pedestrians, tourists in New Orleans, French Quarter, and stuff like that. And before, it was like I was scared of, how am I going to go up to somebody who just wants to take pictures and say, hey, how are you, and talk about Christ? But it wasn't until I realized that this helped me realize this person's a sufferer too. It's no different than homeless ministry. So then I use that approach now whenever I do street ministry to people who aren't homeless. Is like the same way I approach somebody who's homeless, the same way I approach somebody who's not homeless, because it's the same suffering they go through. So that's one of the big takeaways of seminary. And then the other one was just prayer, learning how to pray, and just tracing my development of prayer, seeing prayer first as, I do X, I get Y. That was my idea of prayer. But then it wasn't through going through seminary, especially IPF. It was the Institute of Priestly Formation. It's like a priestly summer camp, but I don't like calling it that, but a priestly summer camp for seminarians, where they kind of learn how to pray and the spirituality of the priesthood, and it's like summer long. And that really taught me that prayer is a relationship with another person, with God. And it's not just you do X, you do Y. It taught me how to break down prayer, how to analyze prayer during the dry times, and also the times of consolation, like how to navigate prayer in those spaces. And it also gave me the desire to want to pray, to want to foster the relationship with Jesus Christ, and to ultimately view prayer as, I'm using this time because I want to spend it with you, Jesus, and then not because I want to just get something out of it. Although there are times you do want to pray for something, but you want to do this for you, for a relationship. So that's kind of where seminary has brought me. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
I was thinking that was really lame. No,
So this guy's lame.
but not lame. That was outstanding. I wish we did it at the third Friday. Maybe we could have them back for a third Friday, because we got a lot of people probably not here. No, that was outstanding. Does anybody have a question?
So make a comment. Every time I work out, I think about Christ was really fit, walked everywhere. The distance from Bethlehem to Jerusalem was
50 or 15? 50. Oh, wow. Wow. I think, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, me. So I've been through that thought. So I'm a doctor, but I'm thinking, what did you have?
Steven Johnson syndrome.
Miss Stevens?
Yeah. Steven Johnson syndrome. Yeah. So, yeah. From antibiotic, yeah. I believe it was penicillin.
Taking that prescription. Yeah,
So how are you enjoying your time here right now?
Of my time here, it's honestly been amazing. When I was actually Zach Zapletal, some of y'all may know him. I was with him yesterday, I was also with MJ. He's a Houston. You may know MJ. You may know MJ. He's a Houston seminarian, but he actually came up to Dallas for some time. So I was with MJ and Zach last night, and we're talking about pastoral year because we're all on pastoral year. We were kind of sharing how in the seminary, you do receive formation and you just taught kind of how to run a parish a little bit, or like things to do in a parish to see growth. But it's all abstract stuff. It's kind of like, oh, in a parish, if you want to see this, do this. If you want this to happen, do this. And then coming to pastoral year and then seeing how diverse and complex a parish is, you kind of like, it's good, but it's like, that's not, I don't want to say it's not true, but it's a lot more complicated than that. So that's one of the, who asked me the question? Was it? Yeah, sorry. That's one of the blessings of pastoral year, is seeing getting more hands-on experience in the parish, but also being able to do ministry. Because in seminary, there are ministry, but it's like sometimes once a week for like 3 hours. But here, you're constantly getting to see the fruits of all the labor that you do in seminary, all the studying you do in seminary, and kind of seeing how that's applied to the parish. That when we go back to seminary, it kind of reinvigorates you, but also helps you, I guess, narrow in or hone what you're learning to a specific thing. Like, I'm learning this, and I remember at a parish, I had somebody ask me this question, or this thing happened, so now I know when I'm studying this where to direct it. So that's one of the blessings.
One more question. So in our word, we pray for you all the time. Each of us, there are members of us that have days of the month that we continue to pray. And so it's a blessing for you to share your story, because for you, we continue and we need you, obviously, to be a good leader. And so in your formation, you still have this year. So in the May, you'll go. Tell us what the plan is for your
Okay.
your ordination.
Yeah, so I'll be at St. Monica till May 11th. And then after that, summer assignment, I'm not sure where I'll be sent. Usually Father Webb will tell us next semester. But I think I'll either be sent to either Honduras or Mexico to kind of hone in my Spanish, or maybe, I know they do Rome experience sometimes, so that's more of like a new thing they do, to send the seminarians to Rome to get, I guess, exposed to the heart of the church. So that's kind of what this summer may look like for me. Then the fall, I go back to Notre Dame Seminary. I'll stay there for a year. And then usually during that fall, I'll get ordained a deacon, but they recently changed it for the whole U.S. now. So nowadays, I'll go back to Notre Dame Seminary for a year, and then that's the spring, have another summer assignment, whatever that will be, and then go back in the fall again. But then now, instead of going back for another year, for 2 years, I go back for half a year. Am I following? Y'all following me right now? Or okay. So I go back for half a year, and then that December, I get ordained a deacon, and I'm done with seminary. So I no longer have to do a spring semester in seminary. That's kind of the change. So ordained a deacon, I'm done with seminary, but then I'm sent back to Dallas in one of the parishes here for the spring semester. And then doing diaconate stuff, getting more parish experience, and then at the end of that spring semester, ordained a priest. So that's kind of the process. Yeah.
I have 2 observations having Kathy, Grace Treasure, Happy New Year with St. Monica. And one of them is, and you have to tell me what it's called, when you give X number of talks to do masses during the course of the year. I don't know what you said that was called.
Oh, the reflections.
Reflection. Well, I had the pleasure of being in the congregation has when your first talk is given at Six Point Conference. And the interesting investigation is twisted to you is that his talk, Ike's talk or reflection that he gave was telling story. I almost felt as though I could be in a fantasy land, but taking the subject of the gospel and readings, and you were creating the story behind it. He was animated, he was fascinating, he was amazing. I had never, ever heard a priest think I were to do that.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, that means a lot.
Mesmerized. And I'm serious. We were just mesmerized with his dainty. And I couldn't wait to hear your mitts when then I find out he's going to be at 8 o'clock.
Oh,
But yeah. And I don't know when it's going to be. You could switch you to 8 talk hall. But you reminded me of when you were a young boy and you were a altar boy. And you'd sit there and you'd listen to the priest's homily. And you'd be creating your own homilies. And that wasn't in any way we use respect. It was part of what God was instilling within you in terms of what you have to offer Him in service to your priesthood. It's so beautifully done, and I'm sure you would think about that. But all you were doing is utilizing the special abilities that He has given. And the other is when you talk about the sensitivity of learning about people. And I have to say that I have observed progressively these past years that I can go into a grocery store and I need to ask somebody to stock them shelves. You know, where's the help for something? And I can sense a lot of purpose the way they answer, or they're stationed in light, or but something in the eyes, or what it is. But he sets this isolation, this aloneness, this hurting that's inside them, even though they don't opt it or they don't probably consciously let themselves think about it because they're doing their job. And I've become, and I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a nothing thing compared to what you're doing as priesthood. But I take every norm. It's always easy to find something to compliment somebody about, whether it's just most recently, it chose somebody's voice. It's very calming. It seems remarkable. Put their working it fast out. The people get upset because the machine doesn't work properly. Something like that. And compliment for part. And then it offers the adding depending upon how it respond. So I say, God bless you. And that's part of my big evangelization it developed. And that's what you're describing, is you learn in the seminary your experiences. And that is just awesome. But it takes us lay people time to get to that point from prayer and I think gay bats. But I think that's actually a beautiful thing that you already secondary process. DOT first 8 houses.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. And then when you were mentioning the, I guess the reflection part, like definitely the Holy Spirit part of what goes into it is like, Lord, I don't know what to say. You know what needs to be said. And then I'll just trust that you will touch whoever you need to touch. Some people may not need it. Some people may. I don't know. I'd leave that all to you. But it comes more to like the rhetoric that's being used or the techniques. What you mentioned with me forming those homilies growing up, that I think does play into it, because there would be times where I would pay attention to a homily. And then when I pay attention to the homily, it's like, what did he say or what did he do that caught my attention and that made me want to still listen to him? And then I'll take that and then put it into my homily, zone them out, and then start making around the house. So, yeah.
I was just curious. Hear a lot about the prophetic here from the people who actually run it. The priests that run it and the organizers and all that. They tell us the advantages of that. I'm just interested from you, a participant, what you felt was the most important thing you got from that year compared to possibly just having gone into the first year seminary and advancing. What is it that you may have gotten out of it or you felt? Because I'd love to know what that is.
Yeah, so I actually did not go through the propedeutic stage, but I had an extra year of seminary, but that I consider my propedeutic stage. But the benefit of having that extra year is it kind of gave me a year to first to discern. You're not taking classes at UD, you're not bombarded by lectures, homework, you're more of just in fraternity, and you can focus this time on prayer, discernment, and learning more like human psychology, forming yourself as a person, knowing who you are, first of all, knowing where those wounds are, presenting it to the Lord, and being able to be healed. And you've got a whole year of all that work, such that when if you do begin classes, you're not struggling to balance classes for the first time and balance seminary for the first time and balance discernment to who you are all at once, but you've already laid a good foundation and solid work to then begin to continue discernment, but then to kind of, you can put more effort or thoughts to your studies, but knowing how to balance that with continual discernment. And I believe you had a question as well, or no? No.
The reflections.
When I don't know, it's usually I sit down with Father G, then he tells me on the calendar, but then I haven't done that for December, so I don't know yet. But